Welcome to the demo of Module 3 where we're going to access the Twitter API. This is going to introduce us to what a closed or private API is. We're going to jump through a bunch of hoops, but eventually we're going to run code that accesses Twitter in the same way we do. And we'll get a sense of what's under the hood, and we'll get a sense of all the different ways to access tweet data, social media data, in a way that's accessible to code. Maybe we should start with what's Twitter. This is Twitter. So I'm on a page of a person. This person has followers. This person follows people. They have a screen name. They have a handle. And then these are tweets. Tweets have images. Tweets have a text. Tweets have, they're from a person. They can be retweeted and liked. They have a date. These are properties a tweet has. And these are all things we can access through our browser. We can access we're used to accessing Twitter through a browser. We're used to accessing its human side, but it has a computer side. Twitter speaks computer practically as well as it speaks human. That's where its API comes in. Essentially, its API is as rich or as good or as complete as its website. And a huge amount of traffic with Twitter is programmatic. So if you've ever, if you've been followed by a bot, or you're worried about bots on Twitter because you're paying attention to the news, they're all authored in more or less the code that you're going to run today. So you're going to be a bot. You're going to see the bot side of the world. A bit of intro, we're going to experience a closed API. What's that mean? It means you can't just run the code and expect it to work. You have to go through a registration process. And when you run the code, it's going to be tied to you, to your identity. You'll go through this registration process, which I have instructions for. You're going to, that's going to give you sort of credentials that you're going to put in a file following instructions I've given you. And you'll be loading that file into this so that you can be authenticated as you. Now, if you're worried about privacy, the notebook text addresses a lot of that. You can bring any of that up with me or with anybody. I'd be happy to talk it through so you understand what you're giving. But the basic, what it basically comes down to is these are actions that you perform on your own account. So you log into Twitter before doing stuff. And this is essentially equivalent. This is equivalent to logging in, except you're logging in through the code instead of logging in through your browser. And those are separate processes. One consequence of a closed API is they're a little more restricted. You can't access things as much as you want. It's throttled. You can't do a million requests. In fact, if you try to run this notebook over and over and over again in a very short period of time, let's say more than 2 or 3 times in the next 15 minutes, what you'll find is you'll start to get error messages as you reach your sort of limit of number of queries. You're allowed to make an average of 1 query a minute. And it's a little arbitrary. It's a little more constrained than an open API that you don't need keys for. What's going on? Why does this exist? Well, Twitter gets abused. It especially gets abused by bots. I mean, Twitter's presence in the news is about how it's abused by bots. And these artificial limits, this requirement to register, all of these hoops you'll have to jump through before you can run any code, there to protect you and the internet and the world and democracy and everybody from abuse by bots. So the limits are there to allow you to explore, to allow you to play around a bit, to allow you to run all of this code without going too far. So there's going to be the code we have in front of us is a little scary, but you don't have to understand it. I'm just asking you to run it, and you're going to follow these steps. You're going to as soon as you run this code, a little box is going to show up. See that box? Upload. Having clicked it, having followed my instructions, you're going to open, you're going to have turned this file, webscienceauthentication.txt, with all these sort of empty entries, you're going to have turned it into a file a lot like this. These are fake numbers, but they're going to look your numbers that you'll get for each of these, for Twitter, for Spotify, for Instagram, for Twilio, for each of these services, each of these closed APIs. They're going to look more or less like this. Now I'm going to load my own information by hitting enter, and now it says, before it said upload 0, now it says upload 1. That means there's one file kind of queued up, and that means we can go on. The weird part's done, and we can run this. Again, what does this code do? I don't know. I mean, I know. It's going to get you registered with Twitter. So you'll run it, and then what we're going to get here is this API. This is an object, a variable called API, and it is your key to Twitter. From now on, from everything below this, anytime you go to the internet or access Twitter, you're going to see API dot whatever you just did. API is the basis of your interaction. So now having gotten ourselves in, let's actually interact with Twitter using this information. So Magic Realism Bot is a bot on Twitter. We are going to first get its user and then extract and then pull its timeline down. We're going to pull roughly, this 200 isn't exactly 200 tweets, it's kind of a suggestion. So now we have a user tweets as an object, it's a variable that we can iterate through. We've iterated through lists of things before, but they've always been kind of made up examples by me. Now the thing we're going to iterate through is a bunch of tweets from the internet that just, occurred. I'm recording this mid-December. Tweets by Magic Realism Bot. A Palestinian judge sentences an assassin to be devoured by a huge leopard. That was earlier today. These 200 or so tweets go back a couple of days to 2 days, it looks like. All right, so that was pulling tweets down. We just had 2 lines of code. Actually, let's go back up there. So if you wanted to get all the tweets by some user, the only thing you have to change is this, put a handle in, and you could do the same thing. So what I'm doing here is I'm giving you code that works, and I'm showing you where to change it to make it keep working for you. Am I showing you how to write it from scratch, how to write it for yourself, how to understand why this is here, why that's there, why I took 2 lines instead of 1 line or 5 lines instead of 10? I'm not going to explain any of that. The purpose of these demos is give you code that works at the expense of understanding. And that's going to complement what the lessons give you, which is a low-level understanding that's maybe not so interactive or that doesn't do as much cool stuff. So you're getting both sides of that. Moving along, if you want, before we got all the a bunch of the most recent tweets by a user, now we're going to get a section of the followers and follows of a user. Again, you just plug in some user. I'm plugging in Merriam-Webster Dictionary's Twitter user account, and we'll get we'll see that it's followed by over a 3/4 million people. It follows about 700 users, and we can actually iterate through a sample of these users. Not all of them because of Twitter API, private API restrictions, but something. This code does that. None of this code is going to change. If you want things to work, all you have to do is change this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Those will just work kind of unchanged. This is going to give a sampling of friends, and the other one, I'm just going to... And then this one will give a sampling of followers, about 100 from each. And once again, if we had put a different user in here, then all this other code would have run differently. Do you have to understand each of these little bits? No, but you can interpret the output. Merriam-Webster's followed by so-and-so users. It follows so-and-so users. These people are the ones following it. All right, so that was sort of a user-centric view from users getting their tweets, getting their followers, getting the people they follow. We can also search Twitter, just like in the interface. You can search topics on Twitter. So BBC documentaries, let's look at that. BBC documentaries. All right, what are my first results? I've got something from Oasis News. Wait, is that sponsored? You don't even know what's an ad these days. Scholar, some proposed BBC documentary, and so on. We could just keep going. So if we run this code, we're going to get analogous content. Let's see. Team 177,000. Let's see what we see. Team. I think we can line these up. There it is. Yeah, it's a little asynchronized, right? Because Twitter's constantly happening. But for every tweet that we find in the interface, we should be able to find this corresponding API-directed tweet, in our results here. So we can put in search terms. We can also use the same functionality to put in hashtags. Hashtags being a major way of signaling interest in a subject on Twitter, and so on. Okay, so we can retrieve tweets and activity by user, by tag or keyword, and also by location, by where the tweets occur. So the search API.search, you can make it take a keyword, the number of tweets roughly that you want, up to some maximum, which tends to be pretty low, a couple hundred. And you can also add coordinates on Earth. So what we've got here is 37.8 north, minus 122, so that's 122 west. We've got our latitude, our longitude, and then this is a radius. So we pick a point, then we pick a radius around that point. What these coordinates are giving is the coordinates of Pier 39 in San Francisco. So we're going to search Pier 39 and find that the first, that we asked for 50 tweets, but we only got like 15-ish going back to the 4th, going back over a week. Now, if we were to do the same thing on a different location, so let's see if we can compare. So 37,808, 37,7702, 122, 4098, 122, 4695. So a slightly different location, but pretty nearby, also in San Francisco. What we have here are the coordinates of the Tea Garden in Golden Gate Park. We're going to run that and see how much activity is happening from there. And boy, nothing. Nothing's coming out. I think also the... look, the California Academy of the Sciences is also thereabouts. So we can find activity about the California Academy of Sciences and activity about Fisherman's Wharf and Pier 39 and everything around there. And we can start to ask questions like, which of these are being which of these are being tweeted about more? Pulling down a certain number of tweets, I got stuff going back to 1204. Pulling back from here, I get stuff going back to 1206. And in each case, I get roughly the same amount of content. It looks like a little bit more from about the California Academy of Sciences. So I'm going to say that at this moment, it's possible that more people who are tweeting from Twitter are at or involved with California Academy of Sciences. And you can also, well, yeah, I mean, so we're surveilling the Earth, and we can ask questions about what's happening now in certain places on Twitter, right? Not everything that's going on, but this gives us insight. And again, all you need to do to make this code work for you are put in keywords of your own and put in coordinates of your own. And then you can start looking at what's going on in other places. If you want to follow Twitter activity at some sporting event, you just find the coordinates of that place. You don't even have to put in a keyword, and you can get what's going on there and then. So there's another category of sort of interaction with Twitter, in addition to pulling tweets down by a user from a place of a keyword. You can also just sort of do couch mode. Rather than actively retrieving tweets on a subject, you can stream. So once again, we've got a bunch of ugly code that I'm not asking you to understand. You're going to run this. And what I've got here is if false stream. everything. If false stream on some subject. I put the if false here because when you run all, when you run these, they just run kind of forever. They will just run forever. So if I don't want that to happen when you just hit run all, so this skips by default. But let's dive in. I'm going to turn this to true, and now this code's activated. And when we run, we're going to get a sample of everything about K-pop and J-pop on the internet. You see, this is happening now. I'm just scrolling down, and this is what people are talking about at the moment. A subset of it. I plan on nothing about international pop at all. Though looking through this earlier, I was impressed at how global it is. There's a lot of languages popping up in these tweets outside of English. And it does reflect the global audience of this form of social media, in which English tweets are just a subset, just a surprisingly small proportion of global activity. So, you've interacted with social media before, almost certainly. You've always done it through a browser. But when you've done it, your browser has interacted with the sort of back end of these social media providers. And you can do the same thing through code. Every action you can perform through your browser, you can perform in code. The advantage of doing it in code, besides demonstrating how magical code is and how versatile, is that you can ask questions and collect data and surveil and interact on another level or in a more systematic way with these things that you interact with in a casual way every day of your life. So I hope this is eye-opening, mind-expanding. Boy, it's still streaming. It'll just do this forever. And I hope you play around with it. Throw in some other usernames, some other keywords, and see what you see. Thank you very much.